Mr. Murdoch, that you?
How's it going?
How are you, mate? Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for committing to this masterclass, this extreme series where we're getting all the top teachers in Ireland to come in and talk us through their different subjects to really help people. I understand that I say a lot of people are lacking guidance and stuff at the moment, and to have this as something that they can listen to in their dead time when they're walking, or when they're just maybe don't want to get their head in the books, and realistically actually to put your incredible structure on things. Just for anyone that doesn't know, Ronan's actually said to us that he's going to go through business with us. He's going to go through economics and Irish, and in 3 parts to each podcast. So in this first one here, Ronan, what we're going to ask you to cover, if that's okay, what's on the business. So this is going to be business today. What's on the business course in this first one, and what's on the exam. In the next podcast on business, we're going to ask you a little bit about how you will get your students to study, and what are your kind of tips and your predictions for it. And then part 3 is going to be basically, I got loads of students to send in their on the ground questions, what stuff that they would ask you if they were in a class with you, or maybe if they were like just in general, just any questions they have. And I'm going to basically put you on the spot and ask you their questions from the get-go. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds perfect. That's great. Yeah.
Okay, so to get things going here, we obviously did do a podcast last year a little bit on this, and I actually did business when I was in Leaving Cert as well, but I can't actually remember any of it. That's how quickly I think the Leaving Cert stuff goes away from me if you're not fully focused on it. But can you just outline to me what does the business course entail, and what's the exam?
Sure. Well, everything it's one big exam at the end. There's no projects or anything like that, so it's 100% boiled down to the exam. And then within that, the exam is broken into 3 parts: Section A, Section B, and Section C. Section A is you'll get 10 short questions, and you answer all 10, but the examiner will take your best 8. And each short question is worth 10 marks. So they'll take your best 8 out of the 10, that's 80 marks. And that's 80 marks out of the 400. So that translates to 20% of your grade. So 20% for Section A, your short questions. Then you'll have your ABQ. And the ABQ for this year in 2020, the ABQ will be based on units 2, 3, and 4. Okay. And they'll have, it'll be like we'll run into it. I imagine a lot of the questions will be on later on anyway, but they'll give you a scenario in business, and you'll usually be an entrepreneur setting up a business, and you'll have to give them your insight on what you've learned from the course and to answer those types of questions that they ask you. So the ABQ will be based on units 2, 3, and 4. And they'll be broken into 3 parts pretty much, and they'll have one part on unit 2, one question unit 2, one question unit 3, and one question unit 4. And then you get to the long questions, and with the long questions, they give you 7 long questions, and you have to answer 4. But you're not allowed to answer any 4. They break the long questions into 2 parts, part 1 and part 2. And actually, I've mapped it out up here because it's a little bit confusing, but at the same time, it's very important. So
you're brilliant. That's fantastic. Thanks.
Great. Can you see that all right? Can you?
We can see Section C here, yeah?
Yeah, perfect. Right. So it's Section C, right? You get 4 questions. You get 7 questions. You answer 4 out of the 7 they're giving you, but you have to do at least 1 question from here from part 1. You have to answer at least 2 from part 2. Now, the 4 questions you can do from either part 1 or part 2. And that's your 4 questions added up. Now, this is actually really important, though, because once students understand the layout of the paper and where the questions are coming from, it can actually help them a lot with their studying. And I'd imagine the big question students might have a lot is, can I leave out units 6 and 7? You can get away with leaving out units 6 and 7. If you're looking over any past papers and stuff, the way the question's formatted, if you only cover units 1 to 5, you'll still be able to answer this question. You'll be able to answer any of these questions here. So in theory, you are covered for Section C by covering units 1 to 5. However, there is a bit of a problem, and the only small problem with this is that with the short questions, you could find yourself being a little bit exposed, because the short questions, they give you 10, they take your best 8. You could see 2 short questions in unit 6, and you might see 2 on unit 7, and that means you can't do all your short questions. Now, having said that, in 2015, like I'm working off 2015 here on the board, like that's the layout of the questions. And in 2015, you pretty much got away. I think it was like 97% of the paper would have been covered if you only did units 1 to 5. So there is a bit to be said for that. So mainly the thing I'd be saying, if you aim for like a H3, units 1 to 5, aim for H2, units 1 to 6. And if you aim for H1, you really need to be doing all of units 1 to 7. Maybe if you want to leave out unit 7, you just at least practice the short questions on it, and that could set you up a little bit for it. But that's really like that's the layout of the paper. And one little thing I'm working off 2000. What they do here, right? This is a bit different. This has always been the same, really. If you look over any of the last 20 years, they never mix this up. They mix this up a little bit based on the years, right? But what you get is this will be built between units 2 and 5. And what you're probably going to see is you'll see question 4 is usually on units 2 and 3. And then here, 5, 6, and 7 is usually a mixture between 4 and 5 here. And that's really that's why I'd always be stressing students, make sure you cover units 2 to 5 really, really well for leaving cert, because that would be, all of part 2, you can answer it there. And it'll also set you up for your ABQ as well, along with your questions. So I think I hope that answers the sort of questions there on the layout of the paper. But it is actually very, very important for business, because students, if they're looking at using their time well, they may decide to leave out a unit. They may decide to leave out unit 7. And imagine if you were looking at a case of, if you had let's even say you had 70 hours you could spend studying business. You might decide to say right, rather than 10 hours for each subject, I'm got 10 hours in each unit or anything like that. I won't study unit 7, and that time that I could spend studying unit 7, I'll invest that into units 2, 3, and 4. And that is in a way a wise move, because you're specialising on the units where it's going to carry the most amount of percentages in your leaving cert paper.
Why did you pick? Sorry, first of all, there's 7 units, is there?
Yeah.
7 units, and then why did you pick 2015? Is that kind of the sort of?
Basically, what they do at the ABQ is they switch the ABQs up every year. So like this year it's units 2, 3, and 4, but my 5th year's the moment for 6 years next year, they'll be on units 3, 4, and 5, right? So and then the following year be units 4, 5, and 6. But what happens is the ABQ cycle will repeat itself every 5 years. Mm-hmm. So that's why I picked 2015. So if you look at if you're looking off any of them, like 2015, 2010 are good papers to work off, because they're the years the ABQ fell in units 2, 3, and 4. Okay. And that kind of comes up with a few things that are important later on. We'll probably go through the next few videos of how that dictates what sort of questions you might be asked in leaving cert. Like if they ask you, let's say your ABQ is going to be on unit 3. I'll show you here quickly. I'll probably go into more detail, but let's say ABQ on 3. So even last year, it's split between management skills and management activities. So if you're looking at unit 3, they break it into. Can you hear me?
Could you just start that again from the board, because I think you're just we just hit off the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no problem. So unit 3, right, is based on management skills and management activities, right? And in the ABQ, even last year for my 6th years, they asked about management activities. And then, however, that left them, when that came up as their ABQ question, that ended up, their long questions then was a question on management skills. So do you see how if you're really looking at it, it's very important for this year in the leaving cert to make sure the students know management skills and management activities. Because even let's say this year, they ask them management skills, that's really very, very strong chance they're going to see a question there on management activities. Like what happened in 2016, they asked them on management skills in the ABQ, and then the management activities question came up here. So that that was mostly in management activities in 2016. So they do it is important for students to make sure they know the layout of the paper, because it can help them to guide them on how to study most efficiently for the exam. Can you hear me all right there?
Yeah, 100%. So from what you're kind of looking at there, just from you were saying then, so in terms of the different units, you could leave the other ones out. The ones that would be most beneficial to form a base this year would be the middle units, the ABQ units, because they carry over.
Yeah, exactly. And unit 5 would be particularly important as well, because even going back, I won't bother going up there again, because but if you're looking at unit 5, good chance they could see unit 5 come up as 2 long questions, because actually it is quite important. So I will show here, right?
Let's get over.
Imagine you're writing the leaving cert paper, Dave, right? Yeah. And you're like, right, well, I've asked them a question here in Unit 2, which is very short, and I've asked them a question here in Unit 3. So now, and then I've asked them on Unit 4. So now you're trying to maybe avoid putting up so much stuff on Units 2, 3, and 4 here. So the only unit you left, because remember, this is on Units 2 to 5, but they've asked a huge amount of questions already in 2, 3, and 4. There's that big temptation, if you're setting the paper, to put more questions on Unit 5 to balance out the way the exam falls. That's why my 6 years this year, I think it's the best year to be doing the Leaving Cert when the units ABQ falls in those units, because you get such a reward from covering 2, 3, and 4. But there's a really big chance, that's what happened in 2015, that they saw 2 long questions. In 2015, they saw 2 long questions on Unit 5. They got question 7 and also question 5. And that's, if you're adding that up there, that's 30%. Came up a couple of times, short question as well. So it ended up being, it could have been worth roughly about 35% of their paper, Unit 5 alone. Now, unfortunately, with that, Unit 5 is incredibly long. Like I was doing Unit 5 this year, my 6 years, and we started it in September, and we didn't finish it until the midterm. Now, you think about it, like that's like 3 1-hour classes over. It took me 24 1-hour classes to get Unit 5 done with them.
Well,
and that's a lot, like, because even, the way the pace you could go from practicing with the grinds and your notes and all that sort of stuff. Now, I threw in a couple of exams and stuff like that, but we were only finished Unit 5 by the midterm.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
And what just with those units then, just because you said that's obviously quite a long one, with those 7 units in biology, I think we mentioned this before, that like there's Unit 1, 2, and 3. Unit 1 basically is 2 chapters. And then unit 3 has, well, depending on how you actually go about it, a ton of things. It's like 10, 15 times as big as the other ones. How does it space out among the other units after that, if Unit 5 is so big?
Yeah, Unit 2 is very short, and that's good news, because that'll fall in their ABQ. So they have a very big chance that their ABQ question will probably be something on maybe being an entrepreneur, skills and characteristics, or the benefits of why would somebody become an entrepreneur, like the benefits of an entrepreneur, or entrepreneurship, like they asked in 2010, the ABQ, what is it and what are the benefits of it? Chances are, very likely that one of those types of questions falls very, very short. But like, if I was trying to predict a question on Unit 4, it's much, much harder, because Unit 4 is quite long as well. So Unit 2 is really, really short. Unit 5 is quite long. Unit 7 isn't actually incredibly long, but it's some of it's quite complicated. Like, you'd go through like the decision-making process in the EU, how laws are drafted, a few tricky enough questions and calculations in international trade and stuff. So whilst it's not the longest chapter, it can be quite tricky, and that's why the temptation is there for some students to leave it out.
Okay. And those short questions that you said there, so say in biology, when we have what we call short questions, what I call the short questions, we know exactly what the questions are coming from each unit. Do you know a spread on that, or is that just random?
It's random, yeah. It is like it is quite just really very, very random. Like, even that year, looking at in 2015, they didn't ask any short question on Unit 7 at that year. So like, and sometimes students might worry a bit too. They might say, oh, is it a case of, because they know students might be leaving out in Unit 7, will they ask a load of short questions in Unit 7? Not really. We haven't seen that evidence from the past papers. It doesn't really tend to work like that. So your best bet, if you are leaving out Unit 6 and 7, is completely practice on the short questions on them. They do like to use a lot of the same short questions, recycle them. So if you're looking at it there, do you remember I showed you there? If you know Units 1 to 5, you're covered for Section B, you're covered for the long questions, that's 80%. You're only a little bit weak in the short questions. So just keep practicing loads of short questions, and again, it'll increase your chances of not being exposed there in that part. The only part you're weak is on Section A, so you just work a bit on the short questions, and that's all you have to do there.
Is just a couple more questions, I best guess, on this outline before we move on to how we would study and stuff. Or is there a section people don't do very well on? Or hard?
Probably maybe Unit 7. If you might Unit 7, because they might know it that well. And what sometimes students tend to do is they might see one. Those long questions I was showing you there, they're broken into 3 parts. So sometimes students might see one easy long question and jump in and do that. But then the 2 other parts they don't know that well. And if you try and waffle in business, you won't get the mark. So that's one thing that happens. It happens a bit in Unit 7, I find, and whether that's the case, the students aren't studying that much, or just whatever way it works for them, they don't tend to as well in there. Unit 5 on the marketing question isn't as well answered as as it could be either. I don't think sometimes now it could be students who are kind of waffling a bit and might be winging it, but marketing doesn't tend to be answered that well unless the student really properly understands what they're doing. You can understand they might be tempted to go for it too, though, because it's sort of easier questions. Like it might be questions for you like what's the role of advertising? And even you could wing that straight away now.
What do you mean even Ro? What do you mean even me? I don't have about 2008 on it. And I've no idea. Mark, what's the role of marketing? I don't know. Looks good. I know what you mean. I know what you mean. It's more of a general question, more that you think you might be able to answer from everyday life. But if you're not specific, you're not going to get marks.
Yeah. It'd be stuff like what are the benefits of branding and packaging, and you might be able to wing it off the top of your head and fire down a few points. But you're really looking. It's a memory exam at the end of the day, and they want those 5-6 key points that they've marked in. So you have to be dead accurate with them. So yeah, that's the want on that. Like so, yeah.
Fantastic. I actually have a good few questions for you on the ABQ at the end, but surely if you know the ABQ is 2, 3 and 4, it's specific to your year, it's big, surely that should be fairly straightforward. Obviously, I would suggest maybe not from the amount of questions I have in it, but what do you think? It's
quite tricky, and the problem with the ABQ is you have to, we'll go through it, like I say next to this, because it could end up talking about this for ages really with it, but they are harder because sometimes you'd have to read through the text and you'd have to apply the knowledge from your course to that exact person in the ABQ. So some points you might have had in your notes that are relevant on that topic, they mightn't be relevant for that ABQ. And you have to find the parts of information that are relevant and put them into the ABQ. So you're kind of like fishing out the relevant parts of the course, and that's what can be quite tricky. Like I might be able to say to you, okay, learn off the 8 elements of a valid contract, and you could learn them off by heart and write them down. But in the ABQ, there might only be 1 or 2 that they want from the question, and that's where it can get a bit complicated. So, and that tends to be what holds students' grades down. Like there's a question on it about, like, they might ask you a question, stock control. Or let's say management control in the business, and like that could be stock control, credit control, quality control, and financial control. But you'd have to be looking through, and they might say something in the ABQ of, a lot of his stock went out of date or something. You to identify that was an example of poor stock control. But some students might have noticed that, So you have to read through and analyze, okay, does this guy have good stock control or bad stock control? And you have to be able to spot that from reading through the ABQ.
You basically have to apply your business knowledge to a real life situation versus just learning. Yeah. I wish they had something like that in biology. They should.
It's a brilliant question. It is. It's a good question. When students practice enough and they know how to do it and they know the tricks, they can do quite well. And there's no big gap. I think a lot of students think the ABQ is terribly answered, but it doesn't work like that in the Leaving Cert. The marks in the ABQ are in line with the rest of the paper. Maybe a tiny bit lower, but it's none of this. Like one time a student said to me, I heard the average mark in the short questions is 70 out of 80. And the average mark in the ABQ is like 40 out of 80. It's not like that at all. It's not that extreme at all.
Don't believe everything you hear. Especially from students.
Yeah. But that's it really. Like But it's a good exam. Like I really like teaching. Like it's a very good course. It's interesting. Like.
Just to summarize for this video before we really get into this is almost the starter. Then we got the main course next, and then we got the dessert. Which I think everyone's hankering for the dessert. But for this first one here, to summarize, there's 7 units. There's 1 paper. The paper is 100%. There's 3 sections. Section A is 80 marks. It's short questions. You do 10. They mark your best 8. That's on all the units. Section B is the ABQ. That's also worth 80 marks, but that this year is on units 2, 3, and 4. Section C itself is broken into 2 parts. Part 1, where we have to answer 1 question. Part 2, where we have to answer 2. And then you make up 1 more of those long questions based on whichever one you want to pick. Is that correct? And one last thing then. Time in the exam, rough?
Yeah, it is quite tough, and that's actually we have a video on our YouTube page about that. So it's like time management advice, and I'd say to make sure you watch that. It's broken down there. It's 3 hours exam, and the first 5 minutes are really, really important that you manage yourself right there. Actually, even just on that question, time. I want to show you one last thing here, right? Is that like what I'd be looking out for this year in the Leaving Cert as well, just in relation to the timing point, is that you might walk into the exam and there's a question that comes up called the break-even chart. And we haven't seen it since 2016, and it comes up roughly every 4 or 5 years. There's a good chance, it could come up this year, right? But what I'd be trying to encourage my students is, if you open up the paper, you might see the break-even chart here as question 7, right? Mm-hmm. And it might be like question part 7B or 7C, whatever. Now, what would happen is, if you go through the paper normally, you could be coming here to doing the break-even chart at the very end of your exam. Now, a lot of students actually will get that wrong, because you have to draw a graph, it has to match up, you have to hit the break-even point. And a lot of students could get that wrong in the day, and they're in trouble then because they've nowhere else to go. So the only thing I'd want to warn my students about is boiling down to the time management stuff. If you roughly, I'd always be saying, like, right, be done with the APQ at about 10:45, right? So like an hour and 15 into the exam. But then when you're picking your long questions, my advice is, if you see something on the break-even chart, do it straight away. And even if that's 7A there, question 7A and 7B, do the 7B part first. And then once you know that, then do the 7A part. But the reason why is, imagine if you got it wrong, or you made a mistake on the break-even chart there and you got the graph wrong. Well, then you've only wasted 5 or 6 minutes, and still an hour and 15 into the exam, you can make that time up. But if you're doing the paper normally and going through your questions here, you get the break-even chart here at the end, and you've 10 minutes left and you're leaving your exam, you have to do the break-even chart. And if you're under pressure, it's going to be whatever, 6%, 7% of your paper. You're putting yourself under unnecessary pressure, and when you're under more pressure, you might make a mistake and you might drop the mark. So I'd always try and encourage students, maybe even walking in June. If I was doing my Leaving Cert this year, I'd be walking in, or sorry, not in June now, but if I was walking in, I'd be expecting to see the break-even chart, and then I'd be drawing an arrow and be saying, like, right, I'm going to make sure I do that first. So if it's question 7B, I'm going to skip part A. I'd skip a page though, and I'd draw an arrow and make sure, I took a note of it. And it's making sure, obviously, I don't go ahead on the rest of the exam, but I can capital letters or whatever, making sure I did that. But I do that very, very quickly once I've done my ABQ. It takes pressure off you, and there's a bigger chance you'll get it right then, I think, anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's good, solid advice.
Yeah.
I just miss it. The break-even charts from Unit 5, is it?
Unit 5, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
one of our big ones anyway. So there's not. So we kind of want to get good at them anyway.
Yeah, and it's come up 9 times out of 10 years though, in the last 10 years. But the thing is, it's come up mostly as a short question. But if it comes up as a long question, it can come up for really 1 year. It's up for 40. It was up for like 10% of your paper. Yeah. Probably if it comes up, probably about 25 marks. And make sure as well, yeah, it is just one they want to make sure they've marked well and they practice it. I try and practice that now as well. Practice it early. You wouldn't want to cram that the night before the exam or anything like that.
Okay. Perfect. Okay, so Ro, that's where we'll leave it for part 1, if that's okay. Because in the next part, what I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to ask you, if I was a student, how would you teach me to go about learning this, getting this stuff into my head? What order? What would you do for these next, these times? What would you advise students going in towards the Leaving Cert, and then your tips and tricks, and then potentially a few of your insider information, knowledge, and then for part C, as we said, we're going to go through the Q&A where you're going to be grilled by students who've sent in some very good questions for you.
Yeah, no problem. I was just thinking there as well, one last thing on it. I advise students as well, the cash flow forecast is an important question for this year. It hasn't come up since 2017. And we have 2 videos on our YouTube page that goes through what they need on that. So I just want to encourage students, make sure you be well worthwhile. I needed one on market research as well, which was a good one from market research. Came up in 2018 and 16, didn't come up last year. It's another one that's worthwhile, but we threw that up on our YouTube page as well. So it's
on the Dublin Academy page, yeah?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And yeah, perfect. Okay, Ro, thanks so much.
Brilliant.
Right, 2.
Cheers, thanks.